Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Friday once again, and it's time for my top 10 Laravel and PHP finds of the week. It's been another good week, plenty of content out there to read, and if I've missed anything, you've put a blog post you'd love me to read, drop me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I'll make sure to get it read for next time. So let's kick it off then with the first post for this week. So first up, we've got the Laravel open source Advent calendar for 2025. So for the month of December, Laravel are releasing a video every day for an open source project. Now we've already had Pennant, we've had Prompts, we've had Telescope and Pale. So tomorrow we're going to have another one. Now don't forget to check back in every day, because of course there's going to be some new videos out every single day. They're really useful to get a bit more information about those projects, particularly if you've never used them. And yeah, it's really nice of them to highlight these kind of things. So yeah, great on them for doing that. Next up, we've got Ollie with his latest post about root model binding. Now, you might think you know everything about root model binding, but I can guarantee you that you're going to read this post and you're going to come away learning something new. I know I did. Now, Ollie has got a really good way of kind of deep diving into these framework features, particularly things that you might use every single day. You use root model binding every day. And sometimes you don't deep dive into them to understand what's going on under the hood. So Ollie's done a really good job here of doing that for us. And yeah, it's really interesting. I learned a couple of things. And again, Ollie's got a newsletter now where he's putting out these kind of articles. So don't forget to subscribe, because he does some really good jobs here. And third then, we've got Simon Hamp and the native PHP team. So they're announcing mobile v2. I mean, it was only 6 months ago that we had the announcement of V1, so him and Shane have really been knocking it out of the park here. They've done a really good job. I don't know if you watch their streams on a Friday, but yeah, they seem to be announcing new features added to the framework pretty much every single day. So, I mean, do those guys sleep? I don't know. Yeah, but they seem to be working hard. So, again, big congrats to them on V2. I'd love to know if you're using it out there, like what kind of projects you've been doing. Like, if you've got something in the store, it'd be great to take a look. And again, big props to him and Shane for the stuff they're doing here. Next up, we have our very own Jamie. He's recently done a post on, he saw a problem that he was happening again and again on inertia projects, something that was bugging him that he had to, continue, he was manually doing each time. So he put together a response handler that he could use for this and share across projects. Again, nice little bit of insight into the way Jamie thinks about problem solving. And yeah, give it a go. Especially if you're an inertia JS user out there, give this one a read. And then next up, we've got Luke. You might have seen Luke from last week's posts on the PR that he had added to the Laravel framework about caching the roots and config traits in tests. Again, another really good post that saved us time on our test suites. So here Luke goes into HTTP polling and using promises in Guzzle. Now obviously this isn't the same as promises in JavaScript, doesn't work exactly the same, but yeah, it's a really good post. It kind of shows you kind of the time savings you can have by doing some of these techniques that he highlights. So yeah, if you make a lot of API calls with a HTTP client, give this a read. You might find some useful tips on how to kind of improve those speed. Next up then is Nuno. Now this is another interesting post by Nuno, because it's a behind the scene look of what goes into running a meetup. Now Nuno has a full-time job at Laravel. He streams, but he also runs the meetup in Portugal, PHP Portugal. So the guy's really busy. So it's really interesting to see the things that he does. What's involved in setting up a meetup. Now, I help run Laravel London and run PHP, so I know some of this stuff. But it's interesting to take a behind the scenes look. And it was really good that his brother was the one who got to film this for him. Next up then is one of my recent posts. I've been recently spending a lot of time kind of looking into the releases of Laravel, trying to pick out some new features that I think are really useful. And there was one in 12.40, which was queue, pause, and resume. Now, I mean, it looked like a simple feature, but I think it's got massive potential to be able to pause a queue, keep those jobs they're stacked up ready, and potentially make a fix, do some improvements and things like that, and then resume the queue and have those jobs not disappear from you. I think it's a big win. I know the team were quite excited about this one when I kind of showed it to them, and it's going to be something that we're going to start using for sure. Next up then we've got, it's two posts really. It's a blog post and then the Business of Laravel podcast. So Joe Rucci, who's the co-founder of Ghostable and Curricula, he is on here. He kind of goes back and talks a bit about history with him and his co-founder, some of the things they've done in the past, and then he kind of talks about why Laravel was the tool that they used for this. Yeah, so it's not a tool that we use, but again, it's an important tool. We all want to keep our kind of environment variables safe and secrets safe and things like that. So again, something that's worth looking at. I know I'm certainly going to give it a quick give it a look over to see if it can potentially replace the things that we already use. But another good podcast and another good post, so go and check them out. And next up then we've got a quick Twitter tip then from Tim McDonald. He talks about data providers here. Now this is some we use in our tests a lot. We use data providers, and they have some shortfallings. There's certain things you can't do, and Tim highlights a problem he often comes across where you might want to invoke an instant method on the class you're currently on. Now that's obviously not possible with data providers as they're static, but Tim here shows a really nice way of doing that. So again, a nice little technique that I know I certainly be using going forward. And then finally, we've got the No Compromises podcast by Joel and Aaron. Podcast's been going a while now. If you've never listened to it, I suggest you give it a listen to. There's plenty of episodes there that they've put together. And in this one, they talk about different ways to model data. Joel brings a kind of real world technical issue to Aaron, to the podcast. And they talk through the different ways that you might be able to model that data. Do you use pivot tables? Do you use JSON columns? There's pros and cons to each. We know that, but they go through it in the podcast. 12 minutes long. Give it a listen. You might find something interesting here. So that's really it for this week. Again, thanks for listening. If you found anything interesting, this week, do let me know which posts you've enjoyed reading. Because it's really nice to hear these things. But also, like I said at the beginning, if you've had a post that you'd love me to take a look at, please just drop me a message. I'll gladly give it a read. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to be notified when the next video is out. Thanks very much. See you again.